For a group like Cherry Knowle, where we're dealing with like the concept of have we ourselves gone insane or has the world absolutely gone mad, usually the concepts come first to us, and from there it usually just kind of like springs into action sort of thing. For an example, I would get an idea for the whole entire concept of like the lyrics first. So if I were to talk about mental health, for instance, then I would go off and write the lyrics first and usually structure out that way. But there's been many a times where I've got the sound. For an example of that, one of our most streamed songs is a song called Bite the Hand, where that song came out of a sample that I heard in a YouTube video where one guy was talking about a biopic of the Runaways, and there is the actor called Michael Mann, I think that's what his name is, that says a whole monologue. Came across as quite intimidating. So the whole monologue is basically, if I trained a wild dog and if it bites me in the hand, then I know I trained it well. My hand is made of iron. So I basically took that audio sample and then spliced it within the track. And then since around about that time when I made it, I was listening to like quite a bit of Depeche Mode, and Master and Servant was kind of on the mind. So basing the song around that sample, I basically made like a modern version of Master and Servant, essentially, with a lot more sexual undertones, and the whole idea of sex is just politics sort of thing. And I think that's just an example of how that came to be, really. In terms of the EP, we basically just did it ourselves. Yeah, so the structure normally gets made. From there on outwards, normally I would take it into, I mean, at that point in the band, there was like 2 other people. Me, guitarist named Jamie, and the other one's called Tim. And I brought it to those 2, and we would just rehearse the song out that way. I basically just give them the chords and said, whatever you do with these songs, just be in time. Then, what we take into the sessions, this would kind of end up as something like this. Maybe like the EQs would have been fiddled with, but essentially in terms of the synths and stuff, it's pretty much there since like almost day 1, unless if I go, I don't like how that sounds, that's too much fuzz, or it just like, no, this sounds garbage. Just to quickly mention, that whenever we do, well, in this version of the band, I mean, currently at the minute, we're kind of going into a bit of a transitional period at the minute. So at this moment in recording, I don't know if, there's going to be any new people in the band, or if it's just going to be like a solo type of thing. But normally whenever we do, those songs live, normally the guitar tracks are cut out as well as like the vocals, so you basically just get the synths, drums, and then sample, and sometimes me with a keyboard. So yeah. Well, the whole band is pretty experimental, and we just kind of been like picking away at like stuff that's like darker sort of thing, and we tend to go for that serious kind of like worst side of humanity that you could really think of almost. Individually, they all kind of like tackle different things, really. So for our second song on the EP, which has a really long title, but we've, shortened it down to How to Sell a Drink. It's basically just about rich assholes, basically, that just do horrible shit, and yet we still consume like the products over and over and over. It's the most popular thing, and that's the thing that's just kind of like pushed to our main front. other songs on that EP which are just flat out just telling you what the theme is, like I Feel the Right. One of the things that I definitely mentioned is that one of the samplers that I've been really loving like using at the minute in regards to the new stuff. Horror pack samples, like I remember just getting like bits and pieces from like horror games, and one of my favorite games is pretty much Silent Hill, the second one in particular. The soundtrack to that is just absolutely amazing, and the drums on it just sound like kind of like 90s in the sense of like everything's so bit crushed, very like trip hoppy, but it's also like very industrial. So one of the main figures within music that's been a heavy inspiration on the band is like a band called Skinny Puppy. They created a song called like Dig It, which is like been like a massive influence for like major different acts. And for this one that I kind of want to mention is like a track called Zombie, which is, it's basically about a warning of just going brain dead in this climate, of just kind of like taking too much of a neutral stance, or just saying, hey, I'm not into politics sort of thing. And it's like kind of like showing an example of what could happen if you do that for a little too long sort of thing. For this one, the lyrics are written out, they just haven't been recorded, but the structure of it is pretty much there intact, including the samples. So still in its process, and the vocals are still yet to be recorded. Apart from like that vocal sample, my vocals being sampled on this one that's been altered. I like to do a lot of like altered vocals just because it makes it sound like very alienating and just kind of weird and out there. So if I bring up the piano and try to find... No, that's too low. I just turn off the processing. So
Zombie.
It's just literally me saying
Zombie.
yeah, saying that word like over and over, but basically just kind of put onto like a sample deck where it's like put in different pitches. These are the two that I went along with.
Zombie.
So it's pitched that way.
Zombie.
But yeah, so I took that and I basically just added on effects of, I think it's like distortion and wah pedal. I don't know why that's in, but yeah, and add that on. It sounds distorted and very kind of like weird sort of thing. So, and in the mix of like this track, it's like I feel like it just fits. Just kind of like adds to like the soundscapes, and as a musician I love to think about like soundscapes and stuff like that. You know, if anything sounds harsh, I go, oh, that's a bit scary. And yeah, there's like two other audio samples in there, which one of them being this kind of like door opening sample that I managed to find in the horror pack, which is, I think that's probably taken out of Silent Hill. But and there's this one, if I remove all the delayed effects and stuff, is from a very famous film actually called was it Dawn of the Dead?
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk here.
which the reason that I basically used that sample was the film itself, Dawn of the Dead, is a whole commentary of like consumer culture and just the mindless of like people that go to their day-to-day lives of just, you know, consuming and purchasing products, of which for the 1970s would have been a mall, but for these days it would be like major online distributors. That idea from like the 1970s is still kind of continued on, and not only that, but like the song is called Zombie, so it's like it was right there for the taking, sort of thing. That's one of the many few songs that I've been working on. The stuff that I've been working on is going to lead up to like kind of like a second EP that is going to be, the way I see it, is like a sister EP of The Brother, where if the brother is looking at the whole political landscape, you know, the sister would probably just point it more towards inwards, and it's going to be a lot more self-destructive as a listen. So, my name is Alexander Armand. I am part of the band. I do the singing, I do the sample arrangements, play synths, and just act like a madman on stage, you know. The EP is out. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend to listen to that. Thanks for having us on.